So in section 1, we are going to be talking about measuring range of motion for the thrower's shoulder. A lot of people should be familiar with this from things we learned in school and what you're already doing in a clinic. We just want to touch on a few nuances to how we measure range of motion that may help to be a little bit more specific and reliable as we measure that range of motion over time. First one we're going to do is shoulder flexion range. So I'm going to take Ben's arm here. A lot of kind of how we've learned to do it in school and also in the clinic is we just take somebody up here and we measure that range of motion. Really important consideration is that as we're doing this, the scapula is also moving. So one thing that we really want to make sure that we're doing is kind of stabilizing the scapula as we go through this process. So with my dominant hand here, I'm going to scoop under the scapula, kind of pin it almost down to the rib cage here. And in there, I can then bring him into overhead shoulder flexion. I'll do a couple reps right before I hit that end range, stabilize. I'll get him all the way down to that end range until I feel that scapula start to pop out, and this is our number. In the clinic, I would have somebody else come slide in right here and use a goney to measure with me. Second one we're going to measure is shoulder layback or external rotation range of motion. Same thing here. This is going to be something that we're going to use a couple people in the clinic. First thing I'm going to do is take a towel roll or something to put under the distal humerus here. That helps to elevate the humerus a little bit up off the table and put the shoulder in a little bit better of a position. In this position, I'm going to have a seat right here next to Ben, and his elbow is going to be right off the side. My right hand is going to kind of help stabilize the humerus down here, and I'm going to supinate his forearm, take his wrist here, and I'm going to bring him back into layback in this position. It's important to note that I'm going to stop here kind of at R1 where I start to feel that initial resistance, and then there I'm going to take him a little bit more into R2 until I feel like he is at the max resistance there. Once again, same thing in this situation, I would have a student or somebody, another clinician, come right here and take the measurement. So if I'm measuring, I'm going to take him to R1 right about here, R2 right about there. Third measurement we're going to look at is shoulder internal rotation range of motion. And there's a couple different ways to measure shoulder internal rotation range. The key is to make sure you're being really consistent over time. Some of the ways that we've kind of learned it in school or in the textbook is rotating here and watching to see when the scapula pops up. I don't typically love that measurement because it's kind of a visual estimation of when that scapula starts to pop up. So one thing that I've really started to like to do, and it's what's supported in the research, is with my left thumb here, I'm going to stabilize the coracoid process. So that way when I internally rotate his shoulder, I can feel when the coracoid pops into my hand and I know that's his end range. Once again, I'm going to lift his humerus, distal humerus, up off the table with the towel roll here. My left hand, I'm going to take under the scap and I'm going to find his coracoid process right into here. My right hand is going to be right here in the epicondyles of the humerus. And in this position, I'm going to internally rotate him and get him to right about here. And that's his end range when I feel the coracoid start to pop in. You can see if I lift my hand up, his shoulder is going to pop up and I can continue to go. So that's why it's really important to stabilize the scap, find coracoid here, internally rotate. And once again, I would have another student or clinician pop in here to take the range of motion measurement. And the last measurement that we're going to take for the shoulder right now is shoulder horizontal adduction range of motion. To do that, I'm going to do a similar stabilization of the scapula that I did with overhead shoulder flexion. So I'm going to come under here, under the scapula, and sort of pin it down to the ribs here. My hand's going to come across, and I'm going to measure here. Pull them across until I feel that end range, and we'll take a measurement. A couple different ways we can do this. One, I can take a visual estimation here and see when his elbow gets to his mid-clavicle, maybe to his nose, or to the opposite ear. There is 3 good visual landmarks if I just want to take a rough estimate. Or what you could have a student or another clinician do is come from this angle and take the range of motion measurement on the parallel or the horizontal here, and then to where the humerus is here. So if I stabilize here, I'm going to come across. That's about at his end range right there. So when we're measuring the baseball player's shoulder range of motion, it's really important to compare their dominant side versus their non-dominant side. We know that as an adaptation to throwing, baseball players will typically lose shoulder flexion range of motion in their dominant side compared to their non-dominant. And we also know that the baseball player's shoulder's total arc of range of motion, meaning external plus internal, is going to be a little bit different side to side. So it's really important to measure the side to side differences, and in the notes below, we'll link some of the important measurements to keep an eye out for.